quiet morning at Heathrow Airport, thousands of people were rushing to check in, dragging their luggage, preparing for long trips. In that stream, an elegantly dressed woman, dragging an inconspicuous silver suitcase, walked through the security area with almost perfect confidence. There were no suspicious looks, no sirens, no random checks. Everything went smoothly like any other trip. But what no one saw, not even the experienced security staff, was what was hidden deep in the lining of that suitcase. Not weapons, not drugs, but a fortune that would make any bank take notice. She was not alone. And this was not a normal vacation or business trip. Behind that suspicious silence were invisible connections stretching from London to Dubai, where every move was as carefully planned as a piece on a giant chessboard. Have you ever thought that an anonymous suitcase could hide an entire criminal system behind it? Jo Emma Larvin, a once famous model in the 2000s, now lives a quiet, low-key life. On the outside, she retains the elegance of someone used to the spotlight. But in 2020, Larvin showed up at Heathrow Airport not for a vacation, but for a carefully orchestrated mission to smuggle cash out of the UK. She wasn't alone. On the same flight that day were her boyfriend, Jonathan Johnson, and several other mules, individuals recruited not for their criminal skills, but because they looked completely normal. To airport security, they were businessmen, tourists, and models past their prime. No reason to suspect anything. Behind the facade was a sophisticated underground structure run remotely by Abdullah Al-Falsi, a Dubai businessman. Each suitcase the group carried contained hundreds of thousands of pounds, vacuum-sealed, wrapped tightly, and covered in coffee to avoid detection by sniffer dogs. Each flight was calculated like cold mathematics, and Larvin was just part of the machine. There were no personal conflicts, no turf wars, no grudges. The motive was simply money. Millions of pounds generated from obscure sources, smuggling, tax evasion, and unidentified backroom deals. The people behind it needed to get the money out of the UK secretly but efficiently, and Dubai, with its open, unregulated financial system, was the ideal destination. This created a need for couriers. They were not armed criminals, but unsuspecting faces. Middle-aged women, former models, young professionals. People who could slip through security without anyone noticing. A WhatsApp group called Sunshine and Lollipops was used to plan flights, give packing tips, and even cheer each other up. Members were often paid several £1,000s per trip, a lucrative sum for someone without a steady job. To them, it may just be a service for you, repeated a few times. But to the investigating agency, it is a clear sign of an organized, sophisticated, and unprecedented money laundering scheme. Since November 2019, Heathrow Airport, one of the world's busiest hubs, has been seeing a number of flights with a strange commonality. Passengers flying in business class, carrying large suitcases, often flying to Dubai without prior hotel reservations or clear work schedules. There have been no delays, no alarms. Everything has been organized to perfection. Jo Emma Larvin was one of the first to come to the attention of the authorities. She took at least 2 flights to Dubai, the first in August 2020 and the second shortly after. On each trip, she and her boyfriend Jonathan Johnson carried luggage containing a total of around £5 million in cash, vacuum-sealed, wrapped and covered in coffee powder to distract sniffer dogs. They didn't do it by accident. The whole operation was supervised by a WhatsApp group called Sunshine and Lollipops. Within the group, the couriers discussed packing methods, divided the money into equal parts, and chose flight times that coincided with the easiest time to clear airport security. Along with Larvin and Johnson, there were others involved. Amy Harrison, 27, made 3 trips, totaling £6 million. Beatrice Oddie, just 26, helped organize the logistics of 16 others, as well as personally transporting more than £3 million over 2 trips. None of them had a criminal record, which is why they were chosen. To the public, they were normal, even likable are individuals. But to the Dubai-based organization, they were vehicles, used to launder millions of pounds without leaving a trace in the banking system. This manual laundering, rather than wire transfers or shell company investments, was designed to bypass all financial controls. Each suitcase contained around £500,000. The gang members were trained to spread the money evenly throughout their suitcases, avoiding any signs of irregularities when scanned. The business class tickets were not only to increase their baggage allowance, but also to give the impression that they were reputable customers. Each person was paid between £3,000 and £5,000 for a trip, a considerable sum for someone without a steady job. Over the course of almost a year, the gang made 83 flights, successfully transporting more than £104 million in cash from the UK to Dubai. The operation only came to an end when the UK's National Crime Agency, NCA, after combining flight data, CCTV and bank analysis, discovered a recurring pattern of passengers, luggage and destinations. They tracked them down, hacked into and collected WhatsApp messages, confirming detailed instructions, such as put on the last layer of coffee or go in groups of 3, split the money. It was these seemingly innocuous messages that became key evidence in the indictment. At first, everything happened so quietly that it was almost invisible. There were no gunshots, no acts of violence. No one reported missing money. But at one of the world's busiest airports, Heathrow, what concerned security officials was not the loud collisions, but the strange coincidences. In flight data records from late 2019 to mid-2020, there appeared to be a string of passengers flying business class regularly to Dubai for unknown reasons and with a remarkable commonality, carrying more suitcases than usual. Not once, but repeatedly with the same name, same flight route, and sometimes the same departure time. The UK's National Crime Agency, NCA, began collecting and analyzing passenger data, security camera images, and travel schedules. The names slowly began to appear in the statistics, not of career criminals, but of individuals with no criminal record, with a sympathetic appearance, a former model, a young woman, a calm, middle-aged man. No one had any specific reason to suspect, which was what made the network so dangerous. They were not detected by their appearance, but by their patterns of activity, something that could only be seen when the data was pieced together and the whole picture was taken. The breakthrough came from the digital data. During the investigation, a WhatsApp group called Sunshine and Lollipops was discovered. The name sounded like a group of friends talking about going out, but inside were messages with specific instructions on how to handle luggage containing cash. The messages included details: the best time to fly, how to pack it so it wouldn't attract attention, how to cover it with coffee to prevent sniffer dogs from detecting it. No one used their real names, but the itineraries in the messages matched the recorded flights perfectly. Through this data source, the NCA traced to a prominent name, Abdullah Al-Falsi, 47, a UAE national. He was not physically present at the scene, was not on any flights, but was central to the chain of communication. In the messages, he was referred to as the person who received the money, the person who confirmed, or simply the boss. With his vast financial resources and deep connections in the financial system in Dubai, Al-Falsi operated the entire network remotely, leaving no trace of banks or official emails. He used luxury hotels as reception points through irregular intermediaries. The essence of this network was not high technology, but super sophisticated organization. Each member of the group only knew his part. No one had a complete view, except Al-Falsi. This made it harder than ever to trace the structure of the operation. However, using travel analysis and digital data, the team began to reconstruct a network, from the leader to the contact person, from the packer to the shipper and the recipient in Dubai. Frequent locations, such as hotels near Dubai International Airport, were also gradually revealed through hotel receipts and location data from phones. Although no arrests were made at the time, the NCA had enough evidence to determine that this was a highly organized, professionally run international money laundering operation that relied on exploiting loopholes in the international baggage control system. Those luxury suitcases were not simply travel luggage. They were financial instruments for a shadowy organization operating in the heart of the UK, under the eyes of thousands of people without anyone realizing it. And the investigation continues, piece by piece, preparing for the next step. A quiet but relentless investigation by the UK's National Crime Agency, NCA, has finally yielded results. After months of data analysis, encrypted WhatsApp group messages, and airport photographic confirmation, the key players in the Sunshine and Lollipops network began to emerge. Beatrice Audi was one of the first to be arrested in May 2021 in a coordinated sting operation. The 26-year-old had made at least 2 cash deliveries, totaling around £3.4 million, and was identified as the logistics coordinator for at least 16 other flights. Her role went beyond just carrying suitcases, as she was the link between the courier and the recipient at each end of the airport. In March 2022, Jo Emma Larvin and her boyfriend Jonathan Johnson were detained at Manchester Airport. They were arrested just before they were due to take a third flight, again on the same route to Dubai. Flight records, CCTV footage, and text messages from their phones showed they had been involved in smuggling at least £5 million on previous trips. Shortly afterwards, Amy Harrison, a 27-year-old junior employee who had made 3 separate trips totaling around £6 million, was also arrested after being identified from airport footage and matched to WhatsApp data. The trial of the defendants took place at Isleworth Crown Court in late April 2023. Over 2 days, the full evidence gathered during the investigation, from flight records, CCTV footage, and detailed messages in the group Sunshine and Lollipops, was played. The defendants did not deny being part of the network, but insisted they were unaware of the full extent of the operation and had only been following instructions. However, the court found that by receiving the money, arranging the flights, and following the packaging procedures, they were directly involved in the organized money laundering operation. The same hearing also named Abdullah Al-Falsi. As the Dubai-based operator, he was identified as the central coordinator and the person who received the money at the other end. Although he was not present at the hearing, Al-Falsi was arrested in the UAE and extradited to the UK, where he was sentenced to 9 years in prison in July 2022. The sentences handed down to the defendants reflected their roles and the extent of their involvement. Jo Emma Larvin received a 24-month prison sentence suspended for 2 years. Her boyfriend Jonathan Johnson received a 12-month prison sentence, also suspended for 2 years. Amy Harrison was given a 24-month prison sentence, suspended for 2 years, while Beatrice Audi, who had a logistical role and made many of the flights, was sentenced to 42 months in prison. At least 11 other individuals were also charged with similar offenses, many of whom received suspended sentences after cooperating with the investigation and were considered to have played a minor role. The case not only ended with convictions, but also left a deep mark on the fight against financial crime in the UK. With more than £104 million smuggled over just 83 flights, it is considered one of the largest transnational money laundering rings ever uncovered. The sophistication of the organization, using ordinary people with no criminal record and innocent appearances, posed a major challenge to the border control system. And the fact that the defendants were mostly given suspended sentences suggests something worth pondering. In the world of modern financial crime, the line between facilitator and organized accomplice is becoming more blurred than ever. More than £104 million has quietly left the country in suitcases, in the hands of people who don't look like criminals. They didn't use weapons, they didn't flee in the dark. They booked business class tickets, walked straight through security, and smiled like any other passenger. That's what makes this case so terrifying, not because of the violence, but because it demonstrates that the key links in financial crime can exist in the middle of everyday life, unnoticed. Jo Emma Larvin and her associates have been convicted, but the question remains, how many other networks are operating in the same way through major airports under seemingly legitimate means? When technology and data can enable a shadowy organization to operate across continents from a group chat, how will justice catch up? If you find this story a warning, please share it so that more people understand that. In this day and age, crime does not always come from the dark, but sometimes it passes us by, right in broad daylight.